Harrison Lewis has lived lives most people only read about, and he's just getting started. After serving the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment and 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, Harrison transitioned from serving in elite military units to founding GRND, a veteran-led athletic wear clothing brand. He also played Division I football, earned a doctorate in physical therapy, launched a global product line and fitness community, and he lives by a personal code he calls his 25 commandments. In this episode, we cover lessons from special operations that shape how he builds his business, the power of standing by what you tell others and yourself, and how the way you react to the cards you're dealt determines your course in life. This is a story of grit, ambition, and, well, should I say, a real grind. Thanks for joining us on this veteran venture. Most people you talk to when transitioning out of the military have never actually transitioned out themselves. You're probably getting a bunch of opinions from people who plan on staying in until retirement and have no idea how to actually show empathy for your situation. This podcast is about providing fresh perspectives and a front row seat for conversations with successful veterans doing big things after leaving the military.
We're all here for the same reason. We just kind of want to give something back and hopefully it'll help somebody, right?
Right.
When did you get back? You were in Tacoma for just a few days, right?
Yeah, I was there last Thursday to Monday, and
Okay.
then had to just get back quick and get ready for launch week. So I got back Monday, and then we had some issues, and we'll talk about it in the pod a little bit, but had some issues with inventory that we've been working on for about 90 days and got it picked up Tuesday of this past week. So it was, okay, we just got 700 shirts back, however many, 750, had to rebag and recount all those shirts because the manufacturer messed up one of our logos. And it took them 90 days with all the stuff going on economically, the tariffs, working through solutions to get them finally back stateside, get a local sew company to sew them up. And then we had to rebag those. There's still probably 200 need to be rebagged, but that's just par for the course. Those are things that happen, and you either let it be a reason to stop you or be like, this is too much, or you find a solution as quickly as possible, even if it isn't the best solution. But you found a solution, you can move forward with it. So
Find a way to yes, baby.
yeah, exactly.
It's like you found a way to yes fixing that filter thing.
Yeah, I think it worked. If it changes, then I apologize.
Well, you look good either way, man. So let's do it.
Let's do it, guys.
Let's roll it. Well, I love the grind shirt too. We can see the top half
Yeah,
right now.
I've got to get you guys one out. Literally, I had the bag sitting there, and they're still right there by the front door. So
The hotness,
that
man.
is my bad.
The grind swag.
Yeah,
Looking
man.
fresh right there.
Yeah, solid collection. It was a lot of fun designing it and finding inspiration behind it all. And when you start a company, you're just like, okay, I have this vision or this passion, but that vision and passion doesn't exactly detail the work or the steps that you have to figure out and sort through to bring that to life. So you're just a sponge. You're that new lieutenant, that new cadet, that new athlete. You're just a sponge throughout this entire learning process. So that's where I've mentally placed myself, and it's allowed me to grow and experiment and just figure out how to do this, how to build a brand, but it's fun.
Yeah, on top of a few other things that you're building too, or new career fields you're finding yourself in. So you've got plenty of places to be a sponge.
Hey, put me in the sink. Put me in the sink and turn the water on, baby.
He's a mega sponge, man. He can
Right.
cover a lot of surface area.
Exactly.
I love that. I mean, and I don't know because I'm not in any sort of fashion industry, but I feel like what you mentioned there's just so many different aspects that you have to be an expert on. You can't just get one thing right or else nobody will buy your product. You have to be right on every single aspect, and not to mention it needs to be like new and ready to go. It's like you can't just do something somebody did 10 years ago. It's got to be ahead of the curve. So I'm excited to jump into this and figure out how you've learned all that stuff so quickly, and it'll be fun. And I love the brand, man. It's cool. The idea of building something on, you have kind of a vision that's going to be, I think that's the number one thing, but
Right.
connecting that vision to reality, I'm excited to jump in and hear how that journey went for you. So
Yeah.
No.
Let's start with rewinding just to kind of a little bit about your origins, Harrison, where you come from, cover your time in the military, and then kind of no need to go all the way to where you are now. We'll get to that, but your military experience and then what it looked like as you transitioned out.
Yeah. So originally I'm from Louisiana, but I'm a second generation Army officer. So born in Europe, born in Germany in the early 90s. And my dad was a colonel in the U.S. Army. So just like my previous, service experience, I was bouncing around, moving around a lot as a kid, and an all boy family. So it was just the boys getting dirty everywhere we went, from Bragg to Fort Benning, Augusta, Georgia, just bouncing around. And my mom's originally from Louisiana, so we got stationed at Fort Polk. If you guys are familiar with Fort Polk at all, it is the worst place I think anybody would
Now,
want to get
did you
stationed.
touch your armpit when you mentioned Fort Polk on purpose?
Yeah, it is the armpit of the Army. But I was reared there. I was reared in the South Louisiana, the boot. So it was just a place that instilled a lot of that Southern tradition, that Southern hospitality, those morals, those values that you really only get if you're from the South. So it was a good opportunity for me to, grow up, whether in sports, being a military kid in a very safe, controlled environment with a great community. So although the installation wasn't that great, we still had a really good childhood. So yeah, grew up in Louisiana. So was there for, third, fourth grade, made friends, built a family, really settled there. And then, football was my life. So I was a linebacker, played ball all through high school, ended up going to college to play football at Louisiana Tech. And at the time, man, football was everything. Like, I loved football. That was like, hey, Dad, what do hey, I'm going to go to the NFL. That's all I cared about. The team camaraderie, the chemistry, just like that experience was one as an 18-year-old really defined my life, and I had a really big pivot during undergrad where my dad, when I went on my official visit to Louisiana Tech, returned to locker rooms, meeting with the coaches, getting a lay of the land. I'm like, yeah, I'm locked in. This is where I'm going to play ball. And when we're leaving, he's, oh, yeah, son, I'm going to take you by the ROTC detachment. I know a guy there. I just want to check in on him. Okay, cool, Dad. Let's go check it out. 30 minutes later, I'm doing a PT test. Had no idea that my dad set this up.
Right hand raised.
Yeah, it was like, hey, you're going to go do a PT test. I'm like, all right, cool. Next thing you know, I'm crushing a 2-mile push-up, sit-ups, knock that out. And I end up going to Louisiana Tech with an Army ROTC scholarship. So that's where like my college journey began. And I'm like sifting through, what do I want to be when I grow up, in a sense. And then after my freshman year, one of my mentors, I was his protege. That's what people used to say. His name is Adrian Cole. He played linebacker. He was all conference, all everything. He was what I wanted to be, when I was a senior athlete. And he went to the NFL, got picked up by the Bears, got cut. And I remember him calling me when he was back in town. He was asking me questions about the military. And it was a huge eye-opening thing. And it was like, man, like this experience, although it might be everything that I wanted, what is God actually calling me to do? What path am I truly set to be on? Because if these reservations enter my life as a young athlete and I'm getting pulled into this other direction, I might need to use some discernment and have some awareness around what this journey could have in store for me. And another phone call, one of my close friends, Sam Peterson, he was a Ranger as well. He was pitching at LSU and he called at LSU as well. He gives me a call and he's like, man, I think I'm going to go be an Army Ranger. And I was like, I had just watched Black Hawk Down for the 100th time, and I was like, that sounds like a pretty good idea, and I think that phone call cemented the path that I was going to go on. And football, I think I went for another year and a half and then kind of transition into full-time military cadet. That's what I was going to do. And then I sent it, graduated in 2015 with a degree in finance. Haven't touched a book, haven't balanced a balance sheet in my entire career. But
you got a P&L now, though.
Right, exactly. So it's coming into play now. It's coming into play now. But, as a young officer, I commissioned in 2015. And even then, I didn't even get the branch I wanted. I was branched into the Chemical Corps, which, if you're familiar with the Army, Chemical Corps is kind of like you're riding staff, right? You're going to be a staff officer. You're going to do USR, which is this big monthly unit report that you're doing. And I was not happy. This was not the branch I wanted. I wanted infantry. I wanted to be one of the guys. I wanted to be a leader, be a platoon leader. So when I got to my first unit, talking to my battalion commander who has served in the 75th, I told him straight, hey, sir, I want to go be an Army Ranger. Send me to Ranger School. I'll fight for a platoon spot here. And then I want to go on and serve in the 75th Ranger Regiment. And he supported that. And that's when training really started in early 2016.
So you went to Ranger School and then they allowed you to rebranch?
So I didn't actually rebranch. So I did the train up for Ranger School, went in 2016, went straight through, came out. And that's when I had a conversation with my battalion commander. He was like, look, you could rebranch to 11 series, but the timeline that it's going to take for you to rebranch, you're going to lose all of your lieutenant time. Like you'll be a captain going to Triple C, going to your career course before you actually become an 11 series. If you go to the Ranger Regiment now, do the paperwork, go through selection, you can create your own opportunity there based off your service and your ability. That sounded more like a tangible timeline for me because, if you're a young officer, you know that your platoon leader time is the best time you're going to have in the Army. There's nothing better than being next to your guys, next to your Rangers, your soldiers, leading at the smallest level. And that's where the real brotherhood actually comes from. So I forego transitioning to 11 series, and I went straight to selection as a 74 chemical officer.
Wow. I had no idea, man.
Yeah, and most people don't, and I kind of let them think what they want because
I would
for
say
my entire career,
you
I was
probably
like,
stood out a little bit in Chemical Corps Bullock. Like
yeah, just a little bit.
you're the only one that would actually showed up when they had the PT test on.
Well, I will say this. I don't know if it was just serendipitous, but we had some dogs in my basic officers course as a chemical officer. There were 4 of us who all served there or went through the course at the same time. We were classmates. All 4 of us ended up becoming Ranger qualified, and 3 ended up serving in the 75th. And then 2 years later, there was a girl who went through that course with us who also went to Ranger School.
Wow.
And she ended up being platoon leader, an infantry platoon leader in the 82nd. So
Blake McPherson would have been around that time, right, Griffin?
I think Blake was maybe a few classes behind Harrison. But
Okay.
yeah, Jack and I have had previous conversations about a mutual friend and connection who was another Chemical Corps anomaly. He went to Ranger School, just an absolute stud of a person, very atypical Chemical Corps officer. And you don't meet many of you guys.
Well, it happens, like the Army has its way and its infamous wisdom to take officers that maybe miss some criteria for a branch, or they place them into a branch to kind of balance the force out.
Right.
Which I understand, but you're also, this is my career. I know you want to take care of the force, but pick somebody else,
Right.
And then guys, the guy you mentioned and some of the peers I went through with, we had to create our own destiny in a way. And it goes with the name of the brand, the grind, the lifestyle, the mindset, where you just don't allow circumstances or external factors to affect or determine your journey. And that's part for the course.
But that is the message, in my opinion, right? Yep. It doesn't matter what hand you're dealt. You got to figure it out and you got to grind through it. And that's like part of the brand. I mean, that is, to me, that's one of the most important things you can learn as a young person or young man. Bad shit happens to everybody. Right. It's not just like this trajectory that's, boom, you just perfect all the time. You can impact your life by working harder than everybody else. And if you have both, then you get a little bit of luck. Sometimes that grind leads to luck.
Exactly.
But, I think that's the number one thing that for people to take away is grind through whatever happens.
Well, we joke about the stigma of Chemical Corps and the people in that branch, but how many of those guys were given that branch against their will and then just fizzled out, did 3 or 4 years beyond that and have never resulted in but then it's people like Harrison that take that card they're dealt and make that part of their identity to build awesome things down the road. So it just goes to show it's how you react to things, like how Harrison reacts to a shipping mishap, right as they do a big launch of their clothing brand, which we'll get to. But it's the tapestry we're weaving of the amazing story that you're building here.
It's applicable to every part of your life. Yes, we're talking about the military, we're talking about brand, family, marriage, career, job, sport, health. whatever it is, this idea or this mindset, there's always going to be a roadblock. There's always going to be a reason to say, man, this is just not obtainable. It's okay to resonate or listen to that voice for a little bit, to become aware of it, to create understanding. But you also, it's completely up to you to turn that volume down and follow your gut, follow your heart. So,
right. No, that's a phenomenal point. I think like with the growth mindset, we've talked on Griffin, that's big for me. It's like the first step of a growth mindset is actually accepting what actually happened. Because if you just ignore it and you say, oh, like that's not me, or that's not, if you don't actually accept whatever's going on, you can't learn from it. You can't grow past it. You have to say, no, this actually happened and I need to get better because of it, So that's phenomenal.
So continuing the arc of your kind of military experience, you were assessed and made it to the 75th. You then progress from it to finish that part of your background and then move into a little bit about the transition out of the service as well, because I know you've got a couple big transitions
yeah.
you've recently gone through.
Well, I mean, kind of touching on my time in the 75th, I can't, it's still, and it's been years now, it still hasn't hit me how transformative or impactful of an experience that was. We're on teams and we work in small groups, and we've all been in some environment that was very team based and mission focused. But I would correlate a lot of my current success or my mindset or my values, the commandments we build for ourselves as we go forward, to my time in the 75th. I was constantly around people that were eons better than me. I'm talking like from physical preparedness, health, from military tactics to just overall intelligence, confidence, all these qualities, people with character, integrity, man. I'm talking the best group of men and women that I ever could have been around. And I carried that almost like an ego. And we all have it. There's a book called Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy. And I've probably read through that book several times now. And he talks about ego being this thing that we use as a gauge of success because we have this perception in our head of what reality is supposed to be. But when you're in this environment, your ego's checked daily because you're not good. It's almost like you earn the right to be here just to have the opportunity to recognize that you aren't good enough. And you're reminded every day by the men and women you serve with. And it creates this truly humbling ecosystem. I think that's the best word, where every day you're just striving to be a little bit better, just to meet the mark, just to prove yourself again. And then you get embedded or indoctrinated into this mindset. And then the rest of your life you are now always comparing in a way, but withholding this standard that was set within you at a very young age, being I was 23, 24 when I got to the 75th, and just carrying that forward. So that's what I did. The war ended in 2020, 2021. I had left the 75th. I actually rebranched for the first time to 42 series. So that's human resources. And that was strategic because when the war ended, I knew that I wanted to go and get my doctorate in physical therapy. And I knew that was like the space or the expertise, professional level education I wanted to use to provide value to the regiment and to forces going forward, right? So big career change, still on active duty. I PCS from Benning. I go to career course, and then I moved to Tacoma, Washington, right in the middle of COVID. And some context around that. I moved to Washington in February of 2020. I was the guy stealing toilet paper driving across the country when the country shut down. You guys saw on the news, you can't stay anywhere. The country's completely shut down. And it's me and my F-150 driving coast to coast and sleeping in my truck. Luckily enough, I was able to find friends in every other country or every other state that I stayed with along my trip. But that's what took me out to Washington, where I joined 4160 of SOAR, which is Special Operations Aviation Regiment, one of the battalions out there on the West Coast.
And you just landed that assignment after Captain's Career Course.
Well, I got a call. So I left 3rd Ranger Battalion and I'm in the career course. And I'm like, okay, do I go to the 82nd? Can I direct hire back to the 75th? and get a call from a guy, never met him before. He said, hey, we're scrubbing records, trying to find someone that's in Triple C that has a lot of soft experience, and you're the only one's names who's come up in the 42 branch. I was like, okay, well, before you ask me any questions, I need you to know that I don't have a day of experience in human resources. Not a single day. You'd be betting a lot on me just because of my experience in the community, where I don't have the subject matter expertise and from the doctrine, so let's do it. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. So
you ever heard of a per stat? That's all you need.
Right. Yeah, I think I learned that week when they called me. So I took a break during career course for 2 weeks, went out to SOAR selection in Kentucky, rocked that, got selected, and then PCS to Washington a couple months after that.
That's awesome. And then that's where you transitioned out of the Army from there.
Yeah. So again, being a 160th, another community, another organization that is tip of the spear, working with the best pilots the military has to offer across all branches. The flight leads, the crew chiefs, the staff, tier 1 organization, absolutely, in terms of culture. And then in 21, the war officially ended. That was also the year I applied to physical therapy school. And again, I'm swinging for the fence, right? I had already had all my prereqs done. I had coordinated with the 160th Regimental Commander, the 75th Regimental Commander, both RCOs, slapped the table on my packet. They both want me to come to either organization, coming straight out of school. I apply and I don't get in. And this is me applying to the Army Baylor PT program down in San Antonio, Texas. So big letdown in a way, and we'll talk about it, but it's one of those experiences that really humbled me and let me know that, okay, you still have to go through the grind. You still have to face each challenge with zeal, figure out what's next, and then go forth.
A lot of people looking from the outside might see, you started the brand and it looks like it's just 0 to 100 really fast. But what most probably don't see is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but as early as 2020, maybe half a decade ago, you already had it in your mind to start this sort of thing, to go down the PT route, to take a whole different direction in life. But it took years of putting the building blocks in place, applying, not getting accepted to the Baylor program, probably a dozen other applications that are in there to get to where you are now. But most people just see on the surface, Harrison kind of went from nothing to where he is now. But it's it took a lot longer than anyone gives it credit for, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, founders, successful people in the space, they kind of grow through this experience as well. It's not that in 2019, when I was on that mountain, I built the brand. It was all those years of putting myself through challenges that gave me the requisite courage or bravery or insight that allowed me to make that decision in the future. We're always stacking our resume, chasing experiences, trying to figure out what we want to do. But it's through that journey you create the confidence to accept failure. Up until maybe last year, maybe stepping out of the military, I'd say 2022, everything's kind of laid out for you in a way, especially if you've already had success in your career. For me, as a lieutenant, I was a Ranger, and that experience could carry an officer through their entire career. You've served in SOAR for X amount of years. This is the environment you're used to training in and being a part of. It's easy to say, hey, this guy is great, this guy's great. But when you go through all these different experiences and make the decision to start over, that's when all those intangible things you get to practice and apply. Because, the military is great and you can succeed and go further, but there's a lot of stability inherently created in the military. And it's until you step outside of it, that's when you realize that there's so much I need to reflect on from that experience to pull out to help me in this next chapter. And around that time, 2021, 2022 is where I had those dark moments, those like, okay, this is a rock bottom type of scenario. What have I done? What's on my resume right now? What things have I accomplished or failed at that I can look at and say, okay, I remember how that feels. I remember what it felt like to overcome that challenge or that failure. How can I use that in this current chapter? And I think that's where a lot of the true transformation takes place.
The confidence that you said you got from that, I mean, that does lead to a lot, but I think it kind of creates the brand in a way. You have to build that trust. Nobody's going to buy a brand about grinding from somebody who hasn't proven that they've done it. Like you have to have that resume built and you have to kind of show like, hey, no, like I built this out of like my own experience. It's not just something I came up with while I was like sipping a pina colada on the beach. Like it's something that is like it defines me at my core. And that will allow you to bust through 3 foot walls. It'll allow you to bust through the hard times when the orders don't go through well. And just that sort of, I don't know, the definition of who you are as a person is going to make that brand just carry further than if it was just like, I got some money and I tried to make this brand because I thought it was cool. You
Right.
know, I think that goes so far.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, Jack and I talk a lot about how the biggest differentiator between people that succeed and those that are just mediocre or maybe don't succeed is the ability to overcome 3 foot walls. I mean, you've encountered them over and over again, probably some that are quite a bit taller than 3 feet, but that's now ingrained in the DNA of what grind is and what you're building for the future. And that's going to pay enormous dividends going forward, having that background and having that laced into the fabric of grind and your own identity as well.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So you get out from the 160th, not to give away the ending here, but you got into PT school. You've now graduated from PT school, got your boards are coming up here this summer from I know from a previous conversation, and grind is as well on its way. So talk to us a little bit about what you're working on now with grind. Talk to us about the PT school as well and kind of
Yeah.
how those merge into the overall picture of where Harrison Lewis is going.
Yeah. So, man, being a physical therapist is another huge passion journey, huge passion project. I'd always been in physical therapy because I was always getting injured, either from sports or the military or just being, incredibly into fitness. I was always messing something up. And PT is just my way of ensuring that regardless of what route this takes me, that there are people's lives that I can impact along the way. Building a brand is great. Like I love grind. I'm incredible. It is my number one passion, right? But I think when if somebody buys a shirt, then they are on the grind, right? They understand this mindset, understand the journey that they're on. They've had some unique experience that connects them to the message. But being a physical therapist is my way of saying, hey, I know you feel this way. I know you're on like this journey and you're part of this community. But here's another layer of value that I want to provide to this body of people, to this community that goes beyond checking out through our online store or showing up to a community event or just telling other people about the brand, whatever that looks like. For me, being a physical therapist was what tangible value am I providing? And how can I place myself at the cutting edge in medicine and performance rehab? I didn't want to just be a personal trainer or some health coach. I wanted to go get the experience, go figure out how to become this doctor, this title, and then use that title to bestow value and enrich others' lives. So still figuring out what that looks like. Coming out of school is almost like I have another big transition in my life. Leaving the military is a big, I don't know what to do. What does this next chapter look like? And I went through that experience, which created the brand. We could talk about that as well, where you just have a bunch of experience. You don't really have a true skill set that's transferable, but you have the mindset to do whatever it is you want to do. And that's how I got into PT school. That's what founded the brand. And now I'm at this intersection where I'm trying to integrate the two, but also there are two new business or areas of my life that are growing, in infancy. So growing clinical expertise, providing value to patients, helping increase the performance, the holistic lifestyle, all these things on the PT side, while also growing an apparel brand. Try to do them at tandem and then integrate those to really drive community and value. So it's going to take some time just because I'm new. But I think in time that it'll be something where people will know that, okay, Grind is an apparel brand, they're an activewear brand and community, but their foundation is all around performance and quality of life. So
Did you work with any organizations that helped the transition, whether from active duty to PT school or a starting grind at kind of an entrepreneur assistance organization? Were there any veteran service organizations that helped you with either of those paths?
So the two that were pretty pivotal from like my community were Three Rangers Foundation, which Mike Hall heads, and there's a couple other phenomenal people, Caroline White, and a slew of historic Rangers and alumni that support that organization. And then the Five Foundation, which was founded for, my roommate, best friend, Connor Bednarzik, when we were in the Ranger Regiment. So both of those, there's a ton of other great ones out there. But I've just been to school in this bubble where last Monday was the first time that I woke up and I was like, oh, I'm a civilian again in a way where now I can lean into business a lot more instead of it being this kind of side hobby thing that I was creating while I was in school.
Right. So you mentioned leaning into business. I imagine it's had to be a very full body lean. I mean, you're very much learning on the fly with things. Talk to us about what you've learned through starting the brand and the company and kind of how some of the military backbone or the military lessons have really come into play with success there.
I think and we kind of chatted about it in the past, making decisions as quickly as possible and being confident in the decision you make. I think a lot of times where I felt stagnant in business is when I was afraid to make a particular decision because of the consequences or the effect it would have, rather than the time of making that decision, whether it was, 2 days to 3 weeks or a month, where I'm trying to think about all the factors at play. I've lost so much time out of fear that I think the military instilled in me the ability to make a decision quickly and then figure it out in stride. Oftentimes, especially, soldiers and people who get out the military, they're trying to figure out, how do I create the perfect condition to go forward? And I think that is like the biggest lie that we tell ourselves, that all conditions need to be set. I need to have a 95% solution before I feel confident to step forward, instead of going headfirst into the dark and realizing that you're the light along the way. So you can't see 100 miles ahead of you because it's dark there. Your light's not that bright yet. But as you go along this journey, you are the light in the path. And as you move forward, your light expands. And you're going along and you're fighting, you're figuring it out. And then you find other people along that journey, meeting you guys, meeting other partners I've come to work with, other athletes, other entrepreneurs. And now you're on this journey together. And now you have clarity, you have vision, and you have confidence because you have a team of people, you have this shining bright light, and you've kind of built some momentum. But you got to take those initial steps, regardless of the direction. I think sorting it out along the way is much better than how to figure out how to do manufacturing on day one. That is not the answer. I would go as far as to say that how to design apparel is an even first step, because I've done that as well. Most of the things I've done in business so far has been on my own, because it's like being a platoon leader. It's like being a company commander or a sergeant major, right? I would never ask my soldiers to do something that I wouldn't do or I've never done. I'm going to ask you to jump out of this airplane at 1300 AGL. I need to have done that before myself, And once you do that and you continue to grow, I now can instill confidence in the process of people that work for me because I've been there and I know how to do it.
That's so important to highlight.
Yeah.
And I think when people are transitioning, they see others who have had success. And Courtney and I use a duck metaphor, right? Like you see the other ducks and they're cruising along and you're like, man, that duck looks so peaceful. They look like they got everything going on. But underneath the water, that duck is moving. You know what I mean?
Right.
You don't see that. And for humans are just funny like that. They just think everybody else has it figured out and they're in their own head and they're like, oh, I'm the only one who doesn't know exactly what to do next. And that's just not true. I love what you said. Just you kind of have to take that first step, even if it's not a 100% solution, because that doesn't exist. The 100% solution is not going. And maybe even if you do find that 100% solution, the path might kind of shift and change once you get that education or once you get that connection or once you pursue whatever you're pursuing. So you got to take the steps. You got to actually just do it. And it's been a theme across the podcast for a while. Just do the thing, get it done, make the connection and put yourself out there, and it'll generally work out if you're willing to put the effort into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you
Right.
said it, as you're taking those steps, what's happening is growth. And for people that are taking steps, it's probably because they have a growth mindset and they're working on building something great. And so when they take that step, what was a 100% solution one step back, or was a easy decision one step back, now all of a sudden is not the right decision because you've grown, you've
Right.
changed. And so the second and third and fourth and 100th step looks very different because you're a different person and you've got a whole different set of opportunities and network to pull from and people to lean on. I love the metaphor of the light. People come into the light that you're shining, and all of a sudden, it's a whole different playing field because you can see a lot more with other people.
Absolutely.
So, Harrison, you mentioned on a previous conversation you've got a list of 25 commandments you live by. Can we talk about a couple of those? No
Yeah.
need to highlight every single one of them, but we'll love to hear some key points from that and how you use that throughout your life.
Yeah, Jack. So I was telling Griff the other day, I was like, I should probably trim these down a bit. 25 is a lot.
I mean, God only had 10, so I love
Exactly.
it. You're just
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. I think 10 is the magic mark. But what I like to do is, and I have a list of 25. 25 was my number playing ball. So I kept that number. And I just find, depending on the mood or the environment or the situation, I'd go through and just look at some. And if one resonates with me that day, then it had a purpose. So I'll spew a couple of these off. There's literally simple phrases or just a quick mindset trigger that I can use. For example, this past weekend has been absolutely crazy. Friends have taken me out, we're celebrating, and I'm not a big celebrator. And I was like, man, I got to get up and train. And it was like no sleep, crazy celebration stuff going on. I had to pull this list out and find one that like really just set the tone to go and get some work done yesterday. So I just call them grind commandments. Very simple. Number one, show up. Number three, update your resume. Number four, chase purpose, not fame, not money, not status. Number eight, train your body. Number 10, be intentional. Number 11, stand on the things you say to people. Number 12, stand on the things you say to yourself. 13, be the light in your darkest room. Number 16, be an athlete. Number 17, embrace the grind. It will always be hard. Number 18, leadership is a craft. Find ways to improve yourself. Number 19, invest in relationships. Number 21, death is coming. Cheated by being prepared. Number 22, stay in season. And number 25, go further.
I love a lot of those are about self-discipline. And I think that is, you can overcome a lot of things with the self-discipline and the grind. And that goes back to, your entire thing. I think also when people, I think confidence comes from self-discipline too, because no matter if you're succeeding or not, if you're working every single day at the thing that you tell everybody you're working towards and the thing you're telling yourself that you're working towards, that is going to be, it's like self-fulfilling.
Right.
Like if you're being honest with yourself and other people and you're committed to that every single day, that's the win, right? Like the success will come, eventually. It's just about how much time you got to put towards it. You know what I mean? Eventually the success will come, but that self-discipline, I think, it's somewhat self-fulfilling because eventually if you do the thing every single day, you're saying to your friends, your family, your colleagues, like that's what you're going to do. And the confidence starts to build. It just becomes kind of reality. And you can forge your own destiny there just by working hard and having the self-discipline.
Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that like confidence isn't this like I pour into my confidence cup and now it's at the brim and it stays there forever. No, the cup gets bigger as well. If you are faced with a challenge, let's say you come across 10 challenges this month and you meet all of those with exceptional confidence, you're not growing. You need your confidence to be challenged. Like unchecked confidence is ego. So every single challenge you interact with or you come across, if that challenge doesn't test your confidence or your resolve, then you're just not going to grow from that challenge. You shouldn't even accept that challenge. You should have some discernment around the challenges you accept. Because as you know, if it's something that you know you can accomplish, it becomes complacency after a while.
Is there a way that you intentionally find challenges that are going to bring your confidence into question to actually kind of flex that muscle? I mean, it seems like you so naturally charge forward into those sort of situations, starting a company, going to difficult school, all the above. But is there a way, let's say somebody listening to this is it's just so comfortable not to get into those sort of situations? How would you counsel them?
I would say, and one thing that, and we'll continue to talk about these things, is identifying purpose and passion. I think is one of the biggest things that I think assisted me with my transition, and like identifying that wig, that wildly important goal. If you can find that wig in your life and place it at your core, now don't replace your core with it, but maybe tether it to your core so they're consistent with one another. If you attach that to a part of who you are, then it will start affecting all the other things that are revolving around your core. For me, religion and fitness and health, those are things that are always been a part of my core. And then my passion with grind really attaches perfectly with it. So now health and family, all these other things, how I move every day, sleep, recovery, nutrition, connection, community, all those things are affected by that wig. And then every day it's okay, what's the wig? Okay, that's the big goal. That keeps me, trying to achieve the greater thing, but it doesn't take away all the other small goals along the way. So I think if you have that thing, try your best to reflect on it every single day or as often as you can.
Well, that's a great point. And with grind, like I assume you've been relying on a lot of other people for help, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't do it all yourself. How do you vet those people when you're looking at expertise or your values, or if they're like kind of in line with that wig? What do you do to vet who's going to help you, and how do you make that decision?
So, and one of the first things that I did when I founded the brand was I took a very deep personal inventory on myself, like all the things that make up who I am. And then I use that to create the brand values. So now I'm looking at being a young Black kid from South Louisiana. What values did my family instill in me? What values did church instill in me? And then what values did I get from football? What values did I get from service in the military and then in special operations? So I just took a lot of these big values and then I put them on a paper and I said, okay, when I make decisions for the brand, this is the lens. These are the contacts that I'm using to look through to make a decision on anything, whether it's personnel, manufacturing, marketing, content, whatever it is. It's if I can use this lens, then it'll be on brand for the business, but also for my own spirit and my own integrity. Right. So once I had those things identified, it helped making those decisions, however big, a little bit more natural and authentic because it was aligned with who I am. So with people, it's like we've always, especially in the military, it's always hard to trust people because mission is so important, or we already know who our team is, or I can trust my own ability, but I don't need to have a perfect solution to get across the goal line or get to the X. So I trust as quickly as I can. The quicker I can look at you through the lens of the brand, if you meet that criteria, extend trust quickly, and then allow that person room to grow as well. I could go out and this is a business topic, but I haven't gone out to get funding yet for the brand because I don't trust those people. And I'm not in a place where, as a young company, that our valuation instills trust in them. So until I get there, I'm going at the speed of trust of who the individual is. So that when that time comes, we have a horizontal staff that we are all in line, mission, mindset, goal, brand, so that when the time comes, we have to force scale, it all makes sense. Which is scary because we all want to scale and grow, but we got to stock our resumes to accept that growth when it happens.
Well, and it's different from the military. And you had a unique experience, but you also had some conventional experience too. There is, you get your team, and there's definitely obviously a selection period for some of the more elite units in the military. but that's still your team. You don't get to pick and choose who you're working with. But on the civilian side, it is kind of your call, especially as a business owner. It's just 100% your call. So that's the interesting thing. I think when people transition out, they realize, especially if they're going into entrepreneurship, you can kind of build your team a little bit, and you can kind of pick and choose who aligns with your values and your goals. Like you said, the values you had from where you grew up and the sports you were in and the military, those are like common values that it's pretty easy to get under that umbrella. But then when you kind of combine them all into exactly who Harrison is and who's Harrison, this company, it does filter out quite a few people, I'm sure. Right. So it's interesting. Are you working outside of the United States with vendors and stuff? You mentioned
Yes. Yeah, I
issues with the
am.
tariffs and everything. How's that
Yeah.
going?
It's been interesting. We were fortunate enough to, Terra Collection was just launched on Saturday. We designed this collection a year ago. It was my first big swing at the production process. So everything was set up before the new administration took over. So we were lucky enough to get most of our inventory in before the turn. But we had that manufacturing mishap, which thankfully they covered the cost. So we actually made out for this collection.
Wow.
Doesn't change how we move forward though, because a lot of larger companies, organizations are adapting. We're looking to do the same thing. Being here in Dallas, there's a lot of stateside manufacturing and textiles that are in the area. So I'm actually getting ready to go and meet with a bunch of those entities to figure out what other equitable solution or pivot we need to make to continue rolling forward. So it's challenging, but it's one of those things like we talk about that it's, is this a forcing factor to quit or to pivot completely, or do we find a way to continue the mission and to keep growing this thing? So, and we talk about challenges and things like that, with personnel making these really tough decisions. Last quarter, I lost my business partner. So I had a partner come into the company, knew him for years, and father, husband, has a full-time job. And I'm like, hey, we're in this thing together. I need more attention. Like, we are full steam ahead. And it's one of those situations where values align, timing doesn't. That's what's unique in business. Military, you're locked in. I know you're not PCSing for a couple of years. We're here in this team together. And especially in the soft community, you're here, So he walked away from the brand right before he went into our major production for this collection. Having no external funding, I had to find 35 grand. End up selling stocks at the worst time to sell stocks, probably since, pre-COVID. So decisions you have to make, and I've learned from it.
I know I keep dominating the questions, Griffin, but that resonates with me so much because, recently we've learned like values don't necessarily mean that you'll fit in a community or you'll fit with the timing, or there's a lot that goes even deeper than values. Values is like the absolute core, like you have to have that baseline agreement and values, but there's even more that goes into it. Like you said, sometimes timing is important. And we're, as a family, we're realizing like there's a lot of organizations that share similar values, but just there's something missing that's beyond values. That is, it's might just be community, it might be timing, but you made it a good point. I mean, sometimes people just, even though they align with values, they just don't have the time or the ability to follow through on commitments. That's resonating with me right a lot right now.
Yeah, it's tough, man, because what do you do? I always believe that if you do the right thing, the right people will find you, and that's something that as I move forward without a partner, it's like at some point it'll happen and it'll be in God's will. The timing will be right. It'll make sense for me and the brand, but I can't wait for it. I have to go out and continue to build my resume. So when that person comes, I'm ready as well.
This is maybe zooming out a bit, Harrison, but I'm curious, are there particular indicators, or to use a land nav metaphor, are there any waypoints that you use to know if you're running towards the right purpose or in the right direction towards a bigger purpose? I know some people say follow energy, and as you get energy from things, that's kind of an indicator or a sign that you're going the right direction. Do you use anything that kind of tells you're headed the right direction, or maybe tells you you need to just keep pushing, not make a pivot?
Yeah, well, it's certainly not financial in this stage. I'm waiting for that kind of pivot where, financial like return is the mark, but that would be inconsistent with my entire life up until this point. This is the first time where financial return, equity, value becomes a mainstay, or it has its own line item on the sheet, where everything before that has been service based, passion based, mission based. I want to keep those things at the core. And hopefully, I find somebody that can provide me insight, advisement, more details on the financial standpoint, because those are the parts of business that, quite frankly, terrify me because it's inconsistent with the entire mission, if that makes sense. Like, I can't use financial return. Now, if I was selling, physical therapy devices and our return and bottom line was the most important thing. If I was selling, a true service, or I was providing a true product, consumable product, I think our entire identity within Grind is psychographic. It's not a bodybuilder, it's not a power lifter, it's not a CrossFit athlete or an endurance athlete. And when we built the brand, I really wasn't focused on attaching myself to a specific sport or fitness domain. Because, dude, everybody's on the grind. Every single person I come into contact with is on the grind in some form of fashion. And if there's a reason for it that's greater than yourself, then you've also removed the I when you spell it as well. That invites you into the community, and it creates awareness around why you do the crap you do every single day. I think keeping that at our core is the mark. So community growth, engagement, relation, I think if we're catalyzing people's journeys and providing them with like existential purpose and drive, that's a better KPI for me in this phase than financial return, than the bottom line. Now, some point down the road, yes, Grind, I do have big, global, large community goals that I want to aspire and achieve. I feel that regardless of where you're at on this planet, you are on a grind in some fashion. If you're not, once you figure out you're a part of it, right? But we're so far away from that. Actually thinking of that disrupts my ability to make decisions today. So I'd rather keep the main thing, focus on building connection and community. And then when those problems down the road, or that big wig becomes something I can action today, then I'll do that.
That makes sense. Well, there's a two-part question we ask every guest, Harrison. It's one ask and one give. So what's one way that somebody listening to this could help you or provide value to you or your company?
Do the self-inventory. If you feel like you have a specific goal or purpose or passion in life, then go after it. If I asked you the question whether if you're on a grind, it's a yes or no question. If you are, great. Continue to go forward and do the thing that you're passionate about. And if you're not, do the deep thinking. If you're getting out the military, write down every single thing you love. Do that personal inventory to figure out your passions, and then go after it. That'd be my only ask from the brand. What was the other part?
Well, and check it out at the grindcollective.com, GRND, no I.
Yeah, check us out. We're on Instagram at grind.us. And we're all about building community. We want to find the people that are out there doing the thing and are passionate about it. So
also very, very impressive production on Instagram. I mean, people should definitely check out your page, because not only will you see Harrison lifting heavy things on a daily basis, but they've got some pretty amazing video work on there.
It's been fun. I think the passion side of being a creative director has a little different from the military, but I always want that splash, that boom, that consistency, and that quality. So that's been really fun, and establishing a standard around that's been cool as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and then second part is a give. Anything you might offer to the audience that might help them, whether it's advice, recommendations, etc.
Yeah, I would say, my biggest piece of advice would be, if you're working through a transition, lean into passion, because especially if you're leaving the communities we're a part of, I have friends that we left SOF and they went to business school. All my friends are graduated from Wharton, Stanford, Darden, Harvard, the big names. And then they go into consulting. So they're at McKinsey and BlackRock and doing great things. But if your passion isn't aligned towards that and you're chasing the money or the stability, it might create some short-term gratification. But if it's something that's aligned with who you are, then, and you keep that at your core, then you can't go wrong. So do the deep work, do the personal inventories, find out what's right for you, and then go and give 100% and then some.
Love it. And then one thing you mentioned as part of your 25 commandments, stand by what you tell others, but then immediately following that, you said stand by what you tell yourself. And I think that's so powerful. It's one thing, I mean, Jack and I talk a lot about integrity, doing what you say you're going to do, and that separates 99% of people because simply doing what you say you're going to do is a lot harder than a lot of people realize, and so few people actually stand by that. But then you took it one step further. You said stand by what you tell yourself. And it's really easy, I would say easy, much easier to follow through on something that you have someone else holding you accountable to when you told others about it. But when you tell yourself, there's no one except you holding you accountable. Right. And so standing by that is a whole nother level. And you seem to be a great pillar example of that, Harrison, someone who's told themselves, I'm going to pursue something at the cost of my finances, at the cost, probably at the cost of relationships, of social interaction, of your own personal time and energy. Like you are sacrificing a lot of these things for this promise that you made to yourself that you're going to go after something bigger that brings you purpose and passion. So I think you're living by those commandments quite readily, and love to see the continued growth of the brand and of the amazing things you're doing going forward, Harrison. So I think that's awesome.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, any closing thoughts, parting advice, wisdom you'd give to someone considering getting out of the military, or that is maybe currently trying to figure out what their next step is? They're on the grind, man. They're trying to figure out what makes sense for them to pursue.
Just go. You know, if you've been called and you have something on your heart or that gut feeling in your stomach, just go. Erase the doubt, erase the fears, acknowledge them because they have a place, but just go. I think that, like we're talking about, figure the things out and strive. You know, a 100-mile race is going to hurt. You might not know until mile 10 or 15, but just go. Like you can do all the growth and learning, the sorting out along the way. But if you feel called to do something, answer that call. Listen to it, record it back, play it on your voicemail, whatever you got to do. Just go forward and do great things.
Awesome. And
that's awesome.
And go follow Harrison on Instagram because you'll get a little dose of inspiration daily.
Absolutely.
We'll link to everything in the show notes, Harrison. We'll have a link to Grind page, the Instagram, your personal page and stuff. So anyone listening to this can come see the awesome things that you're doing and continuing to build going forward. Thanks for taking the time to talk. This has been awesome. And
thank you guys so much.
Nothing but green grass ahead for Grind and Harrison Lewis as you keep on building, man.
Yeah. Hey, guys, I'm looking forward to doing it again sometime.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Ventures Podcast. If you heard something interesting or found the show to be helpful, send it to a friend who is transitioning out of the military or considering a transition. We'd also really appreciate if you left a rating and review of the show. That helps us reach more people with these amazing stories of successful veterans. We'll catch you next time on the Veteran Ventures Podcast. And until then, go do the thing. Make that decision, have that conversation, and go find your next mission.